Do you believe that life from somewhere else, while you ran this program, came here, visited, observed?
I will tell you unequivocally that through the observation, scientific methodologies that were applied to look at this phenomena, that these aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the U.S. inventory, nor in any foreign inventory that we are aware of.
So I know you're being clear, but I mean, the answer is yes.
I can't speak on behalf of the government. Obviously, I'm not in the U.S. government anymore. My personal belief is that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
That was published on CNN's YouTube channel just 3 days after the bombshell, December 16th, 2017 New York Times article dropped that began this entire escalation surrounding the UFO topic. Lou Elizondo has done a commendable job serving the American public and all 8 billion world citizens who simply want to know the truth of their universe and not have that truth covered up and worse, be on the receiving end of sophisticated disinformation campaigns to lead us all off the trail of truth.
There's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral, and it's totally frightening.
Now, that's the thing about Grusch. He has taken the disclosure process to the next level. He laid it all on the line. And it would be an understatement to say he didn't mince his words. It's not, we may not be alone, but my God, alien bodies and recovered spacecraft are part of the equation. Lou Elizondo, on the other hand, he was kind of softening up the target, if you will, nudging us collectively into the realization of our place in the universe and the state of government lies. David Grusch, on the other hand, took what was softened up and unleashed a thermonuclear truth bomb that ensured that the disclosure process could not go in reverse and will have to be addressed to the fullest extent by the United States government and other governments. The quickening has only just begun. We wouldn't be here without Lou Elizondo. And because of David Grusch, there is no reverse. And the genie that has long left the bottle has made a vow never to return to it. We are beginning to enter a new world, at least in my subjective analysis. Basically, David Grusch ceased the dance and stopped the nonsense on the spot, which is one reason I refer to him as the Indiana Jones of the disclosure process. He's not dancing around the heart of the issue. He's executing. Just like that. On June 26th, Senator Rubio was interviewed by News Nation's Washington correspondent, Joe Khalil. Dean Johnson was able to acquire the full transcript from that interview, and I want to share some parts that didn't make it into the televised interview. News Nation. He, that is Dave Grusch, also claims that AARO is not being read in, that whatever this program is, allegedly is keeping the people who are supposed to be dealing with it in the dark. It's not just about funding, it's about disclosure to AARO as well. Do you think that's realistic, or how problematic is that if that's accurate? Senator Rubio. It's very problematic if it's accurate, because if that is accurate, and again, I'm not in a position yet to make that judgment, but if that is accurate, what you're basically saying is that within the government of the United States, there's a group of people who believe that they possess something that they don't need to share with anybody, including elected officials who they view as temporary employees of the government. and in essence, some sort of an internal military complex that's their own government and is accountable to no one. So it would be a huge problem if it's even partially true. Here's a part of the original interview conducted by Ross Coulthart on News Nation that truly blew my mind.
I make myself available to Secretary Austin, DNI Haynes, who was a recipient of my complaints. I'm happy to further brief elected officials on the specific ecosystem of secrecy down to the fine details.
The testicular fortitude to call out some of the most powerful intelligence officials within the U.S. government on the UFO issue is breathtaking. And as you probably know, he also called out Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the current head of AARO. I've never seen anyone in all my life begging the establishment to call their bluff the way that the Indiana Jones of disclosure is displaying. It's truly awesome and gives me goosebumps. Here's Representative Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin on the Pat McAfee show talking about the brand new legislation that was first reported on in detail by Dean Johnson on June 24th.
We're going to pass, hopefully, another piece of legislation that Rubio is doing in the Senate and I'll do in the House, which basically says if you are part of any reverse engineering, crashed exotic materials recovery program, you are not allowed to access any government dollars, but we'll offer you amnesty to come forward and report to us. Because the claim that Dave Grusch and others are making is that these programs exist and they're in violation of the law because Congress is unaware of them. So we have to smoke that out in order just to examine that claim. And
Here's a great excerpt from Merrick von Rennenkamp's latest article from The Hill, titled, "Congress Doubles Down on Explosive Claims of Illegal UFO Retrieval Programs." This excerpt will provide greater clarity and elaboration on the groundbreaking new legislation that Representative Gallagher was just speaking on. The sense of Congress is that any illegally hidden craft of non-Earth or exotic origin must be brought out of the shadows for broader scientific and industrial analysis. In particular, the goal of the legislation is to avoid technology stovepipes, a reference to the non-sharing of information due to excessive secrecy and compartmentalization, and to integrate any recovered exotic technology into the nation's broader industrial base. The sense of Congress provision aligns closely with concerns expressed by multiple officials that extraordinary secrecy prevents the robust scientific analysis required to make sense of the advanced non-human craft allegedly retrieved in recent decades. On June 27th, I interviewed independent journalist Matt Laszlo, and he actually broke news during that interview, of which I want to go into deeper. But let's start off with that clip.
All right, and I'll give you this breaking news. Ranking Democrat in the House, Jim Himes, head of, or the top Democrat on the intel community over there, 2 years ago, when they got briefed by, those two hearings they had, when Congress dragged those officials from the Pentagon in, he asked them specifically, do you have any craft? Do you have any inorganic material or organic material? They both emphatically said no. So what he's looking for is, all right, did those two lie to me under oath? And that's where everyone's pulling the strings, and I'm just looking to see what that sweater looks like in the end.
What Matt Laszlo is referencing occurred in May of 2022, the first hearing on UFOs in over 50 years. We had a subsequent hearing to that, and it is reported that we're going to have multiple further hearings that are going to be much more explosive than the first two, which were not that explosive because those that were questioned downplayed the UFO issue, whether they're correct or not. But what Laszlo is referencing took place in May of 2022, and Representative Jim Himes asked the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, Scott Bray, but of course the other person that was being questioned during this hearing was the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, Ronald Moultrie. But this following clip is from that hearing where Representative Hines asked directly, are there any organic or inorganic materials recovered from UFO crashes?
Second question. I think, Mr. Bray, you said something that I want to unpack a little bit. A number of these UAPs, you said, we can't explain. Again, in the service of sort of reducing speculation and conspiracy theories, we can't explain can range from a visual observation that was distant on a foggy night, we don't know what it is, to we've found an organic material that we can't identify, right? Those are radically different worlds. So when you say we can't explain, give the public a little bit better sense of where on that spectrum of we can't explain we are. Are we holding materials, organic or inorganic, that we don't know about? Are we, picking up emanations that are something other than light or infrared that could be deemed to be communications? Give us a sense for what you mean when you say we can't explain.
Sure. When I say we can't explain, I mean exactly as you described there, that there is a lot of information, like the video that we showed, in which there's simply too little data to create a reasonable explanation. There are a small handful of cases in which we have more data that our analysis simply hasn't been able to fully pull together a picture of what happened. And those are the cases where we talk about where we see some indications of flight characteristics or signature management that are not what we had expected. When it comes to material that we have no material. We have detected no emanations within the UAP task force that would suggest it's anything non-terrestrial in origin.
As you'll notice, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence Scott Bray stated that there is no material within the UAP task force that would suggest it's anything non-terrestrial in origin. He was very careful to specify UAP task force. Well, that's the thing. David Grusch, in his interview with Ross Coulthart, explicitly stated that the UAP task force was blocked from getting access to the very information that reveals that the U.S. government does have organic and inorganic material that has been acquired, which proves non-human intelligence is engaging our planet.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
Now, in that interview with Ross Coulthart, Dave Grusch said that at one point he was extremely highly cleared in terms of his security clearance, so he could receive all the most profound secrets of the U.S. government, the most tightly guarded secrets of the U.S. government. It has been reported that he had access to 2,000 special access programs. And in this interview, which is worth reiterating, he called out the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, and the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, as well as the current Director of AERO, which is the continuation of the UAP task force, Sean Kirkpatrick, and said, look, I'm willing to give you all the information. I'm willing to tell you where to look, the documents to analyze, the locations, the building numbers, so you can verify what I'm saying is true. It just blows my mind how Dave Grusch is so aggressively prodding the U.S. government to call his bluff. So if Dave Grusch is lying or delusional or pick your soup du jour, it really should not be hard for the U.S. government to verify that, call him out, and maybe either find the hell out of him or put him in jail or both. So my point is this, and I'm just trying to be as objective and as rational as I can, because we need to look at this for the incredibleness that it actually is. If this continues on, and there's not like a joint admission announcement from the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and from the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, saying, Dave Grusch came forward. He made all these allegations. We looked into it and it's not true. If that doesn't happen, then I'm going to be like, why is that not happening? Why is the U.S. government allowing these conspiracy theories to spread like wildfire? And we have more hearings coming up, multiple more hearings coming up from the House and from the Senate. And Dave Grusch is very likely going to testify in those under oath, as well as other witnesses, whistleblowers. The things are getting real. And if all of this is complete bullshit, then the U.S. government needs to make that clear, because otherwise people are going to just steadily lose trust in the U.S. government. You know what I'm saying? So this is from journalist Matt Laszlo. He was able to speak with Representative Jim Himes, and he posted this interview on June 29th. And I'm going to read the exchange that he had with Jim Himes. And in this exchange, Jim Himes is referencing that clip that I already showed you, where he asked the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, Scott Bray, whether or not they have organic or inorganic material. But bear in mind, when Scott Bray responded to that, he only referenced the UAP task force, in which David Grusch has made allegations that the UAP task force was denied access to the information that would demonstrate that, yes, the U.S. government does have organic and inorganic material proving a non-human intelligence is engaging our world. But let's get right to that transcript. And this is from a very recent conversation, which makes it newsworthy. Matt Laszlo, curious, as your committee, how are you guys dealing with that UAP whistleblower, Jim Himes? We haven't really done anything with it yet. Staff is sort of looking into the situation, but we haven't done anything officially with it yet. Matt Laszlo, their claims are pretty out of this world, Jim Himes. I mean, we did hearings on this less than 2 years ago. Matt Laszlo, yeah, Jim Himes. And I was assured by all of the various units that there was no material. Matt Laszlo, yeah, Jim Himes. No organic or inorganic material that they were hiding or anything else, so I'm skeptical. Matt Laszlo, yeah, Jim Himes. But we'll ask the questions, Matt Laszlo. But now he's claiming there are SAPs that are hidden from Congress, Jim Himes. Yeah, I know, I saw the claims, Matt Laszlo. Yeah, but that one, Jim Himes, inaudible, Matt Laszlo, appreciate ya. Let's get into the prospect of future hearings. Journalist Matt Laszlo published on June 28th an article titled, Exclusive, Representative Burchett hopes to hold public UAP hearings in July. I'll read his summary, and I'll link to the full article below, which has the transcript of his conversation with Representative Tim Burchett. If Representative Tim Burchett, Republican Tennessee, gets his way, the U.S. House of Representatives will hold public hearings on UAP when lawmakers return from their current 2-week July 4th recess and before lawmakers leave Washington for their month-long August recess. Hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. We ought to get a date for you, Burchett told me while walking across the Capitol grounds last week. Oversight Committee Chair James Comer tapped Burchett and Representative Anna Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, to head up the House of Representatives' investigation into whistleblower David Grusch's explosive claim that the federal government is keeping Congress in the dark on its UAP program. The Tennessee Republican wants to hear from Grusch himself, though he's also pushing Pentagon officials to redact and publicly release UAP records, because they've already got information that we'd like to see. When we have a whistleblower saying they've collected and they have bodies, they have craft, and I'd like to hear his testimony, Burchett said. And on the Senate side, Matt Laszlo published this article published on June 27th titled, Exclusive, Gillibrand scheduling hearings with UAP whistleblower David Grusch. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat of New York, is working on scheduling hearings with UAP whistleblower David Grusch, along with the current or former government officials who seem to corroborate some of his claims. Gillibrand says it'll open to the public They'll be open to the public if Grusch agrees to allow cameras in. Last week, the senator announced she'd secured full funding for the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, in the Senate Armed Services Committee's markup of the fiscal year 24 National Defense Authorization Act. Gillibrand is also pushing a measure in this year's must-pass National Defense Authorization Act in response to Grusch's claim the federal government is hiding special access programs, SAPs, from Congress. Her proposal would bar funding for any government program that isn't directly funded by Congress. So if there are SAPs out there that are somehow outside of the normal chain of command and outside the normal appropriations process, they have to divulge that to Congress, Gillibrand recently told me. The full article is linked below, which comprises of the transcript between Laszlo and Gillibrand. On June 6th, the day after the debrief.org published the David Grusch expose, their YouTube channel had the guests Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean on, who wrote the story, and they were discussing why they rushed the story to publication, because the Washington Post was going to publish it, but they were taking too long. From what I understand, they were still doing the vetting process and so forth. But the following clip with Chrissy Newton, the host, Leslie Kean explains why they published the story when they did.
But we know the Washington Post didn't pass on this, so let's clarify that. But let's talk about, why you felt the pressure that you needed to put it out right away, because we see that tons of people are asking that question, and try to clarify and not make a conspiracy theory that, you were pressured to do this, but instead, why did you feel the pressure individually, not by other people, to release this so fast?
I don't think we can reveal all the reasons. I mean, it has to do with a lot of placement of various media that's going to be coming after and so on. But the main reason was because there were leaks that were developing. Even Dave's name came out. One of the other people in I think it was actually on an interview you did with Danny Sheehan, actually. And there were just leaks that were building and building and building. And our source, Dave Grusch, was starting to get nervous. He was starting to get strange phone calls. There were, people were making weird comments about FBI raids. And it was just like the tension was just building for him. He'd been waiting for so long that it just got to a point where the leaking process we were worried about, that somebody might go out and try to do a story about him that presented him in a negative light, for instance, or lie about him in the media. I mean, people do all kinds of horrible things. So we just felt this urgency at a certain point. We just had to get it out. And that's what he wanted as well.
So David Grusch received a lot of nastiness from coming forward as a UFO whistleblower. He reported to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, as well as the Inspector General of the intelligence community, that there was and is a UFO crash retrieval program, or actually it's a crash retrieval program tasked with recovering foreign technologies, but also non-human intelligence technologies all over the world, and bringing those technologies back to the United States government for study. It's also reported that the Five Eyes have a secret agreement to take part in this, because these non-human intelligence crafts are allegedly crashing all over the world. But that aspect of the story is beyond the scope of this video. So he reported the situation, David Grusch, he reported it to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, then the Inspector General of the intelligence community. And the Inspector General of the intelligence community assessed that his complaint was urgent and credible, not just based on from what I understand, not just based on what David Grusch reported, but also other witnesses that corroborated his reporting that he wasn't even cognizant of who they were. So my understanding is the complaint is based upon the existence of a UFO crash retrieval program that wasn't being reported to Congress, but also unlawful reprisals for coming forward. He did it through the proper channels. He did it in accordance with a new UFO legislation. And he was receiving all kinds of nasty reprisals from, I don't know who from, but he doesn't go much into it because the investigation is still ongoing. But as you heard from Leslie Kean, he was feeling a lot of pressure, and he wanted his story to get published ASAP as a form of protection. And so the following clip, we will see Indiana Jones running from the Jovitos of Peru, I believe, and he's yelling to the pilot of the plane that's sitting in the river, "Start the engine, start the engine." This is another reason I consider David Grusch the Indiana Jones of disclosure. Funny enough, I just recently started watching Raiders of the Lost Ark because I saw it pop up on Disney Plus. And then when I started watching it, I'm like, wait a minute. My Lord, this is David Grusch. This movie is about David Grusch. So I'm like, I got to make a video about making the argument that David Grusch is the Indiana Jones of disclosure. And I hope I made that. But yeah, man, David Grusch wanted that article to go live ASAP, which was basically Indiana Jones running from the Jovitos and yelling at Gus, "Gus, turn the engine on, get it up," right? So that Indiana Jones could escape the Jovitos. And in this instance with David Grusch, he needed to escape those that were harassing him, escape the potentiality of a potentially worse outcome. But by going public, it brings it out to the sunlight. So those that would conspire against him will be more reluctant to do so now that everyone has a bright light on David Grusch and what he stated. So thank God that got published quickly and speedily in the debrief, and here we go. So the question, of course, arises, do I think this is all real? Do I think David Grusch is telling the truth? And of course, let's keep it funky. Let's not make the mistake to think this is just about Dave Grusch. Two other people in the debrief article alone went on record corroborating his claims. Carl E. Nell, former colonel, current aerospace executive, and I think the other guy's name, Jonathan Gray, who is a current government employee for NASIC, National Air and Space Intelligence Center. Then you have the reported witnesses that testified under oath to staffers in the Congress, as well as the Inspector General of the intelligence community corroborating David Grusch's claims, people that David Grusch isn't necessarily even cognizant of who they are. So this isn't just a David Grusch story, and it'd be very disingenuous to try to proclaim that. Oh, it's way, way more corroborated than that. And it's been many weeks since this story broke, which was on June 5th. And believe me, it doesn't take a genius to ascertain that if he could have been discredited, he would have by now. He's making some very serious claims about the Department of Defense, about the U.S. government. He literally called out the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, and the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, as well as the current Director of Aero, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And so what I would argue is that every single day this goes by and it hasn't been put to rest, yeah, I'm getting more and more suspicious that there's, at very minimum, some truth to what he's saying. So, and we have hearings coming up in the House and Senate where David Grusch is going to presumably testify. Tim Burchett said, from what I understand, by the end of July, we will have hearings with David Grusch, hopefully. So the momentum, the trajectory, this is all going in, is not making the United States government look good. Who has the power to dismantle this public relations image problem? The United States government. So if they don't come out at some point and speak out against David Grusch and be like, his allegations are crazy. We don't have recovered vehicles of non-human origin, nor do we have a crash retrieval program that we're hiding from the United States Congress that fulfills these objectives. Nonsense. throw David Grusch in jail, fine him, he lied under oath. If that doesn't happen, muchacho, you bet your bottom dollar there's going to be some suspicion up in this noggin that he's telling the truth. And if you're intellectually honest, I don't know how you couldn't see it that way. At least some suspicion. Doesn't make the United States government look good. Hearings are coming. That's only going to make the United States government look worse, presumably. Now, in the end of that interview, you can't read my mind. In the end of the interview that happened after the June 5th story broke in the debrief, investigative journalist Ross Coulthart interviewed Dave Grusch on the News Nation outlet. And he said this at the end of the interview, which I found compelling. He doesn't have a utopian ideology that disclosure will solve world problems, stop war entirely, but he's hopeful that through a moment of pause, if this would unite us as human beings, because we've gotten more divisive over the years. So let's say David Grusch is telling the truth, that there is a UFO crash retrieval program. It's been hidden from Congress illegally from the oversight committees. It's been getting taxpayer dollars. Nobody knows about that. Congress is supposed to have oversight on where the money goes. And in addition to that, that there are nested UAP programs within special access programs. I've covered that before. I'm not going to go into that. But basically, a highly sophisticated, concerted effort by people in the U.S. government, very few, hiding these programs from Congress, studying non-human intelligence. If that is actually happening, then I do think this will come to light. Because think about this from a rational perspective. If this is true, it's common sense that it will ultimately come out. No secret can be kept indefinitely, particularly a secret of this gravity. So what happens if 10 years from now it comes out? How would that make Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines look? How would it make the Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin look? How would it make Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick look? How would it make the members of Congress directly involved in this look? 10 years from now, we would look back and say, where were you? David Grusch said in the very interview with Ross Coulthart, he's willing to talk to anybody with clearances and give him the requisite information. Where were you? So I'm optimistic because people care about their legacy. People care about their perception. If this cover-up has been going on for close to 90 years, as David Grusch claims, there is no excuse not to cut it out yesterday, ASAP. If it comes out 10 years from now, that's going to have a highly detrimental impact upon the legacy of many people directly involved in this process. And hearings are only going to make, in my opinion, the future hearings are only going to make the government look even more culpable of lies, obfuscation, and even disinformation campaigns. Exciting times. But I will tell you this. Journalist Michael Schellenberger said something really, really insightful. He said, we should have an open mind in both directions. An open mind that it could be true, an open mind that it could be false. And that's what I try to do. On the other hand, every day that this persists and the U.S. government doesn't put this to rest, my suspicion might grow just a little bit. Don't forget to subscribe because things are really starting to get interesting. And I have every intention to cover it as best that I can. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. You become a patron. You can become a YouTube member. You can give me a one-time donation. All the potentialities can be accessed in the description below. A little tired. Or you can just slap a like on this bad boy and I'll appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all patrons, YouTube members, those that have bought merch, those that have given me one-time donation. I couldn't do without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.